Lovely. All right. So thank you guys for being on today. I know it's kind of a middle of the day situation for you guys. So again, thanks for taking time out during my office hours to be on. This is our 598 orientation video Zoom. So this is where we're going to hopefully answer questions about your projects that you have. We'll go through all the instructions that are posted on Blackboard for your industry projects. We'll make sure you're all aware of what goes into each of those sections. I'll give you your deadlines. There are a couple of hard deadlines that I haven't included on Blackboard yet that we'll talk about in this Zoom. And then I'll hopefully just answer questions at the end, or feel free to sort of chime in as we go. And I will work to answer those questions about anything that we have. So, this is your capstone class. If you're taking this class, this means that you are at the end, or at least approaching the end of your time in the MA program. So that's exciting or terrifying, or whatever feelings you're feeling. It's a good thing either way. And so this is kind of the last hurdle to get you to that point of graduation. I know most of you are planning on finishing in December, and if not, you're probably finishing in the spring. So either way, we'll get this project out of the way. This class runs kind of in the same vein as like a comprehensive exam, but it also sort of runs similarly to a thesis. It's kind of a weird combination of both. And if you've looked at the project requirements yet on Blackboard, you've probably kind of noticed that. But what we'll do today is I'll actually pull up Blackboard and I'll pull up those instructions, and we will talk through the requirements for each of those sections, including the proposal, which is those first three sections, and then the final paper, and also the new edition, which is the defense presentation video. I've added that over this summer, and it worked out really well. So we're going to keep doing that in the fall as well. So I will go ahead and share my screen. I think there's all of you. All right, so this is what you all should see on Blackboard. This is a student preview, so our Blackboard shell should look very similar to this on y'all's end. Again, I sent the syllabus the other day and posted it on here as a PDF. The syllabus isn't super important for our purposes, but what is important is these guidelines and instructions in this document here. You'll also see that I have added a link to, all right, we'll add Kylie. Hang on one second. I have added a link so that you all can schedule meetings with me. This goes directly to my Calendly. It syncs to my Outlook calendar. We'll talk about this later, but this will be important when we start talking about your proposals and your project ideas. We'll actually need to meet one-on-one and discuss those more in depth. And so just you'll use that link to do that. And then also you'll see some sort of content here that's just review content essentially for you all. So we'll talk more about that and why that's important in a second. More people admit. We'll just keep bringing people in as they come. All right, so what's really going to be important about today's meeting is just discussing these assignment instructions and these requirements. And again, these are posted on that Blackboard homepage, and you've probably looked at these at some point already, but we'll go through each section to sort of explain it in more detail. And so we call this the Applied Industry Project, 598 Industry Project. Because we really want you all to sort of show us in this last course that you have gotten the information that you need out of the program to the extent that you can actually look to solve problems or issues within our respective industries, right? Whether that is advertising, PR, marketing, promotion, whatever industry you're currently working in or intend to pursue after graduation, we want you to actually be able to take the information and apply it to situations or things that are going on in those industries to improve them for yourselves, for your organizations, for your clients. Okay, and so these projects are industry focused in that you are going to be working on issues that you are seeing in real time in your respective industry or the industry that you plan to pursue after graduation. Okay, so when you're thinking about your topics that you're looking at or the topics that you plan on pursuing, keep that in mind. Is it something that's going on within my particular organization or my particular industry? Or is it something that I intend to pursue after graduation or that I'm interested in? And is there something going on in those industries that is a quote unquote problem or a situation that you think could be improved through a research lens or through the lens of some applied research. Okay, so that's kind of what we're doing here. But and without reading this to you guys, because I mean you all are adults and can read, but it's designed to demonstrate your understanding of the concept that you've learned. You're looking at an issue, a problem facing your industry, or something that you intend to pursue. And really, you're submitting this project in three parts. Okay, there is the proposal, there is the final paper, and there is that video component at the end. Okay. And you'll submit the final paper and the video at the same time. They're just two sort of separate things. Okay. So, just to give you guys some deadlines and some context for when things are due, okay, for this project, you only really have two hard deadlines, and that is your proposal deadline, and that is the deadline for that final paper and the video. All right. And so, if you guys want to jot these down, I'll post these when I post this video as well on Blackboard. It'll be in the notes. But the proposal, which is these first three parts together, okay, that's going to be due on October 17th. And there are reasons for all these dates, but the proposal is due on October 17th. That's a Friday. All right. And then the final and the video, so these two parts here, those are due on November 14th. And I know that sounds sort of sooner than the end of the semester, but there's a reason for that, and we'll talk about that later. But so proposal is due October 17th, and then about a month later, before Thanksgiving, the final and the video are due on November 14th. That's also a Friday. Okay, everybody got those down? We good on that? Cool. Okay, so we'll talk about the reasons for that in a bit, but I want to talk through the pieces themselves, just so we're all kind of aware of how they're going to go. So your proposal, again, that's the first part of this that's due. It's these first part one, two, and three of the project that all consist of your proposal. Okay. So really, again, what we're doing with this project is taking something that you have observed or something that you have seen in the wild, in our industries, in industries that you are interested in or that you plan to pursue, looking at those industries sort of holistically and seeing what are some issues that you have noticed? What are some things that you have noticed that are problems or potential problems or issues that have come up, again, within your own context, within your organization, or within the industry that you currently work in? What are some things that are going on that you think could be potentially improved, ideally, by going through a research process and actually getting more information and data collection on that, or at least establishing a method to collect the data? Or what is something that you are interested in pursuing or learning more about in terms of industry problems, right? Things that are just going on in the wild that you think you would be interested in researching, okay, and actually developing a method to get more information about, okay? So that's kind of what we're doing in these first three parts, is actually establishing what that industry problem is, right? And how we can get more information about it. So if we look at part one here, we call it the context of the problem. What is the issue that you are actually looking at or that you intend to pursue? What is the opportunity that you want to discuss in this paper, right? What is affecting the industry? What is something that is affecting the industry that is, again, generally probably a negative thing? So, for example, we've had students in the past who have worked in maybe donor relations, and they look at ways to maybe increase donations, or especially with everything going on now with DEI issues, which, is a big no-no. We can't say that, but looking at that and how that is impacting, things like public relations and advertising. So there's a lot of different directions you can go with your problem. It's just really going to be up to you to kind of figure out a direction there. Okay. But in that second bullet point under there, you can see you're to provide details about your organization or the industry that will help explain the setting for the discussion, right? So if there's any history there, give us some background. This first part is really just background on the problem itself. Okay, so if you're looking at a particular organization, if you're doing something related to, Southwest and their big sort of PR blunders they've had this last year, or if you're thinking about looking at something, in a more recent sense, like a Cracker Barrel and how that's all kind of fallen apart, right? Give us information on the particular situation itself, because in the next section is where, in the part two section, is where you'll provide actual background, okay? And what we mean in background in this situation is more of like a literature review. Okay. Because the big situation with these papers is that it's an interesting combination of applied research and academic research. Okay. So what we're doing in the first part is giving more of a situation analysis of the problem that you want to work on or that you want to pursue. Part two, again, this is all part of the proposal, all these first three parts. Part two is more of a literature review. Okay. This is where it gets into more of the academic side of things. And what we mean by lit review is that you and I, all of us individually, will meet together and actually decide kind of what process we need to go through in terms of theories or models could help explain this issue or could help provide more context to this issue, right? So, for example, if we are thinking about something like the Cracker Barrel situation that's happening with their rebrand, right? We could look at theories like theory of reason action or visual framing or something like that to help explain why that was so controversial, right? Looking at any sort of literature or theories or models or whatever that we need to help explain that situation, or that could again provide more context for why that situation was, or is problematic. Okay. And so we individually, again, we will discuss that in our individual Zooms. And again, in those initial Zooms, especially one-on-one, we will talk about the problem that you're intending to pursue and how we can kind of build a case to explain that for the purposes of our paper. Okay. Have I lost anyone on those parts yet? It's pretty straightforward. Okay. So again, this first part, this context of the problem is more of the situation analysis of the problem that you're intending to pursue or that you're looking at, critically in the industry. The second part here is going to be more of that traditional kind of literature review background situation where you start explaining theories or models that help explain what has happened with that situation, or again, that can provide more context to that situation. Okay. And again, these will all come out of our one-on-one meetings. And so don't panic too much right now if you can't think of anything or, you're not sure of what theories or whatever that you want to pursue. We will discuss that in our one-on-ones. Okay. So don't panic about that part yet. Um, Also in our one-on-ones for your proposal, you'll see down here we've got a methodology section. Okay. Now, the whole point of these industry projects is to essentially build an instrument that you could use and actually implement in the real world, in industry, to gather more information to develop a more effective solution to that problem. Okay. We are not doing data collection here. We are not actually going through IRB and all of that kind of stuff. There's too many of you, first of all, and that process takes too long. We just don't really have enough time for that. But my goal at the end of this paper, of this project, is that you will have an instrument, whether it is quantitative, qualitative, whatever it is, that you could actually implement in your industry or in the industry that you're planning to pursue to help address that situation, to help address that problem. So, for example, if you are working on a project that is something about internal relations or internal communications within your organization, our goal here, if we were to develop maybe a survey to gauge the effectiveness of those internal comms, we would put that survey together here and you would submit that as part of this project. But then also at the end of the day, pending approval from your higher ups and everything, you could actually potentially implement that survey in your organization to help actually address the issue, right? Now, we're not doing that here, but you can take it with you and potentially implement that thing. Okay. It's going to be a ready-to-be implemented instrument, whether it is a survey, whether it is focus group questionnaires and processes, whether you were looking at, something like a content analysis of social media content or whatever. You'll have all that available to you, and you will have put that together in a way that could be implemented in the industry. Again, could be is the pejorative term there, because again, we're doing very sort of baseline, no data collection kind of stuff here. But you will all develop something that could be implemented in the industry. Okay. Um, but here in this methodology section, we'll again discuss this in our one-on-ones, but we'll actually describe the method that you want to use to answer your proposed research questions, right? So if you decide that you want to figure out, the effectiveness of your organization's internal communications with C-suite level, employees, right? For something like that, we would put together a survey, right? We would determine why a survey would be the best, method for this, why we would go the quantitative route, or would it be better to go the qualitative route, right? We'll make all those decisions in our conversations, and then you'll just have to kind of justify what that method is and why you chose to use that. Okay. Um, Talk about recruitment again, how you would choose the sampling frame, who you're sampling, all that kind of stuff, right? And then we'd actually talk about the design of the study. So if you were doing something like a survey, we would actually put together the survey questions. If you were doing something like a content analysis, we would actually put together the code book that you would use to code that content. Interview guides for something like personal interviews, questionnaires for your focus groups, like whatever method you choose to go with here, we will actually help develop that in a way that is fully fleshed out and able to be implemented in the wild. Okay, so that's kind of the end result of this is that you have the full paper with rationale and explanation, but you also get the instrument, right, that you could potentially use later on if needed, right? For our purposes, I just need to see that you can do it and put it together. But again, there's no reason why you couldn't take this with you and actually implement those methods um, in your place of work or the potential place that you were intending to pursue. Okay. So that was a lot of me talking. The first three parts, again, are what constitute that proposal. And if you think about it in that way, it's really just the same structure as a very straightforward research paper. Okay. It's an introduction, a lit review, methodology, and that's your proposal. Okay, that's the first thing that you submit. And really, that's the brunt of the paper. That's the largest chunk of the paper. And so you've got several weeks to start working on that. Um, and that again is due in October. Okay. So once that part is submitted, once the proposal is put together, once you've submitted that to me, well, even before then, I'll back up a bit. During this proposal process, so while you're working on these first three parts, you have access to me throughout that entire process. Okay, so what that means to me is emails, Zooms, phone calls, whatever you need from me, you have access to me directly during that proposal process. All right. Once that proposal is submitted to me, we are no longer doing our one-on-one meetings. Okay. I will give you feedback on the proposal that you submit, but by the time you submit the proposal, if we have talked enough, it's going to be fine. There won't be a whole lot of feedback. There may be some sort of technical stuff, but other than that, I'll know what you're working on and I'll know the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And so by the time you submit the proposal, it's probably going to be okay. But regardless, once you submit the proposal, I will give you feedback on what you submit. Okay. And then that will springboard you into that sort of final paper part. Okay. The part that's due November 14th. All right. And so once you've gotten feedback from me, then you can essentially just wrap up the paper. Okay. You have a month to do it, but there's really only one section that you have to complete to wrap up that paper. And that's just implications and discussion. The whole point of this, again, is to sort of explain how the method that you put together, how the research that you have done and would conduct would help address that industry problem, would actually help address that situation out in the wild in industry, right? And what outcomes you would expect to get from that. Okay. So describe the expected outcomes of the proposal, provide details about your expected theoretical and practical implications. So what would be the implications if this were to be implemented right in the world? Like what would actually occur? What would we think would occur? How would this actually benefit the industry if we were to actually pursue this research or address this problem, right? Discuss any limitations of the proposal or recommendations for future research on the topic, again, to improve industry outcomes. At the end of the day, again, what we're looking to do is to solve a problem in the industry or develop methods at least that could potentially solve that real world industry problem. Okay. And the problems, again, can be as specific or as broad as you want to begin with. You and I collectively on our Zooms will just sort of work together to make something that's going to work, right? Something that is actually focused enough to work for this project. Okay. Um, again, at the end of this, you will obviously have a works cited in APA style. You will have an appendix or multiple appendices that include things like your actual method, your survey instrument, your focus group questionnaire, whatever it is. And so we'll put those together as well. We'll talk about that when we get closer to time. But just know you're going to submit something that's no more than 20 pages. um, that number is fairly flexible. But if you're doing all of this stuff and, justifying your methodologies and all this stuff, using enough sources, 20 pages will just sort of happen very easily. Um, and that doesn't necessarily include your cover page and all that. But again, don't think so much about the page count, but shoot for something roughly, 18 to 20 pages. All right. Again, this is sort of your comprehensive project, so you should be able to do that relatively easily in the time that you've been given. And most of that will come from that proposal. Okay. And again, that's where you're using your sources. That's you're doing your lit review. Your lit review should probably be the longest part, right? And that background section and that methodology section, those should take up the brunt of your paper. But don't stress if, you're only at like 8 or 10 pages when you finish that part. It'll happen, I promise. Um, it's APA style. Obviously, you guys have been in this program long enough to know that everything is APA style. Your in-text citations and your works cited page at the end. So just keep that in mind. Two, people ask in the past, how many sources do you need? That's really sort of subjective and that's really up to you. I would shoot for no less, than like 15 or 20 external citations. Just for the sake of the length of the paper, it needs to have some substantial background, some substantial lit review. And that goes into the literature review background section, that goes for your methodology, justification, all that needs, support. And so that's, you know, plenty of citations, but, that's a minimum. So, feel free to use more as well. Okay. Um, so that's the paper. So before I move into the video part, are there any questions about the paper itself? I know again, it's all written down for you, but this is the time to ask. And we can ask questions at the end as well. So if we want to keep going, that's fine. All right, cool. So that's the paper part, right? That is the written content portion of this project. Okay. The new thing that we're doing and something that helps me, and there's multiple reasons why I've done this, but something that's been really useful or was really useful over the summer was the idea of this defense presentation. If you were doing a traditional thesis or something like that, you would have a defense presentation where you actually justify your work. And it gets reviewed by the committee. However, the committee in this course is only me, so it's either it's either you did it or you didn't. But the defense presentation is very useful, and so it's just a short video that's essentially explaining your work and justifying it in sort of an audiovisual thing instead of just the written component. One of the benefits of this is that it shows to me that you can actually articulate the information that you've written down, and it's not just sort of written down in a way that you think sounds good, but you can't actually explain or that you don't actually understand. And the other thing too, and not that you all would do this, but it actually shows me that it's not just AI generated and that you actually did the work and understand what's happening. Because again, it's very easy to sort of cut and paste things from ChatGPT, but you've got to explain it and justify it and rationalize it in a video. That makes it a little more real. Okay. Again, I'm not accusing you all of doing that. It's just a safeguard, right? That shows me that you can actually articulate your work. And the other part of this too is that in the professional world, you need to be able to explain what you've done, right, in a sort of coherent way. And so again, this is justification in the form of a defense presentation submitted alongside your manuscript. What I don't want here is just kind of a regurgitation of what you wrote down. Okay. What I want from these defense presentations, and again, it's very short, it's only like 8 to 10 minutes. Um, Hit on the main ideas of your research and explain the theories and models and findings in a way that makes sense to sort of the layperson, right? In a way that makes sense to actually explain what you did instead of just reading it off of the slides, right? You are welcome to have visual aids as you go through this. So if you put together, some slides or something like that, that's fine. But I need to see you. right? So I need to see you doing it. You can screen share, have your little bubble in the corner. You all have seen my Loom videos at this point where I have my little face in the corner. Something like that works really well here. But I need to see you kind of doing the presentation, right? It's nothing super formal necessarily, but I just need to be able to see you explaining the work. Okay. And again, don't overthink this. This is in addition to, but it is a required component. Okay. Um, I don't care what platform you use. I don't care how you get the video done. As long as you have a video component to this submitted with your paper, um, that's great. Okay. But the failure to submit the video is not good, right? So just go ahead and submit the video component when you submit your paper. And again, there's a lot of reasons for this, but it's really beneficial to me to be able to see you all actually explain your work and justify the actions that you did, justify the methodologies, justify why you chose that topic, all that kind of good stuff. So again, you can have slides, you can have whatever visual aids you need, but I do need to see you kind of present that information as well. So again, don't overthink it, and you've got time to think about that, and you can ask questions about that later if you need to. But that's kind of the last component of this. So for those deadlines, again, on the 17th of October, you're submitting that proposal. That's parts 1 through 3. Okay. And then after that, you were submitting your actual completed paper, works cited, appendices, title page, all that good stuff, right? Plus your video link as that final, submission on November 14th. Okay. And the reason for that early kind of submission date for that final piece is that the deadline for me to have your paperwork submitted to the grad school to graduate is the 28th, and that is also the day after Thanksgiving. So I'm planning on doing that before Thanksgiving week. Because I will not be working that week. So I need that week to get those graded or read through and sort of submitted to the grad school. So that's why that deadline is so early. And that way, by the time Thanksgiving rolls around, you'll know where you stand. You'll know your status. You'll receive a notification of whether or not you were successful. I have no doubt that you all will be successful in your projects. Not a big deal. Um, but that's why that deadline is so early. So that's just an administrative stuff on our end. But at this point, I know I've talked literally for 30 minutes. I said we weren't going to be here the whole time, but here we are. So I'll leave the floor open to questions. I know that was a lot of information at one time. But also just remember, we will have one-on-one meetings between, now and the time you submit your proposal, absolutely. But you have full access to me throughout that proposal process. So if questions come up or whatever, we can talk, then as well. But I'm happy to answer any collective questions right now.
Hey, thanks for doing this. This is super helpful. I do appreciate the info. I guess the just kind of going back a little bit to something you said. It sounds like, I mean, clearly there's a ton of overlap between the first three parts and what is what gets turned in. So does it make sense to write as we're doing the first three parts as if that's going to be the paper we're going to turn in anyway, or is it going to have a little different language like we are proposing to ABC?
No, so the proposal itself is just essentially the first 3/4 of the paper, right? So that will be part of your final submission as well. So think of it as the paper itself. The what I'm going to give back to you is just going to be suggestions on things like formatting, things like that. But those 3 parts will still make their way into that final paper, sort of as is. So just think about them in terms of just being the first, 3/4 of the paper. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Um,
Jackson,
for
you popped on. Yep. Okay. Hey, Aubrey.
oh, hi,
Yeah,
sorry.
you're good.
For the information, I just have a quick question
Sure.
about one-on-one meetings with you.
Yeah.
Would you say this 2 o'clock time is generally the best time for us to meet with you since it is your office hours?
That's a great question. So if you click on that link on Blackboard to set up meetings with me, it has my full availability, and the meetings are going to be set up for 30-minute increments. So there, it's got all my availability. My office hours are typically going to be all day on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So you'll just set up whatever time works for you on those days, and I'll automatically get an Outlook calendar invite thing. So whatever time you set up on that calendar is when we will meet. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. Great logistical questions. I love it.
I had a question.
Yeah, Lenny. Hey.
How many meetings do you typically like recommend like work for one-on-ones?
So, also a great question. It really depends on you. Some semesters, I've taught this class every semester since I started working here 4 years ago. So, some students I'll meet with one time, and that's all I'll hear from them. Other students want to meet more regularly, some as often as every week. I don't necessarily recommend every week because you'll need to actually work on the stuff we're talking about. But, that's really up to you and kind of just the needs that you have for that week or whenever. So there's no minimum, there's no maximum. Definitely not like every day, probably. But just as often as you need to. And again, there'll be some weeks where I can't meet for whatever reason. I'll block off my calendar. But yeah, so it's really just as often as you need, again, within reason. So yeah, don't like try to get on my calendar like every.
Basically, when we get a topic, we can just meet with you to like start it then.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, so,
sorry.
no, you're welcome to set up, as of, this afternoon, I've got my availability set for Thursday, and I think I went in and updated everything, for the rest of the semester as of now. So you can set up meetings, whenever you need to. And again, I would recommend setting up a meeting to discuss your topic, just so I'm kind of aware of what everyone's thinking. There are also 17 of you. So just keep that in mind that I'm going to be working on 17 projects with 17 people. And so, if you want to set something up relatively quickly to get the move on that, that might be a smarter idea. Because again, we just want to make sure nobody should be working on the same thing either. There's no reason why you should have any overlap in your topics. So yeah, so if you want to go ahead and start setting up meetings, that might be a good idea because there are a lot of you. So just, plan accordingly.
Thank you.
Yep. I will also say, because there are 17 of you, I am not opposed to the idea of working in pairs. You do not have to. I'm going to suggest that you do not have to. Okay, I would never force group work, whatever. No more than pairs, right? But I think if that is something that you are interested in, the rigor is going to be a little bit higher for the project if you work in pairs because there's two inputs. But I just need to know that if you are interested in that and everyone's in agreement. You don't have to tell me right now, obviously. Shoot me an email. Um, I would much rather read through, 10 really high quality papers than, 17 mediocre papers. Not that they'll be mediocre. But, if you are willing to work in pairs, you're welcome to. But again, just know that if you do, the level of sort of rigor of the project is going to be increased, fairly significantly because there are two of you working on it together. Again, you do not have to do that. That was in the original assignment instructions that I took on 4 years ago. And in classes that are large like this, I offer it. I don't do it when there's only 8 or 10 students, but if there's more than like 15, I offer it. Again, most people don't bite on that, but some people might. And so just keep that in mind too. You're welcome to it. Just you have to let me know and I've got to approve it. All right. So just keep that out there. And again, know that your fate to graduate lies 50% in someone else's hands. So there's that. I haven't ever failed anyone. I've come close. Um, but just be aware. All right. And again, you can just let me know about that in email. If you're working by yourself, you don't have to let me know. But if you are planning on working with someone else, just let me know over email. Other questions about this? And again, if something comes up, feel free to email me or whatever. Hey, Jackson.
Hey, I just wanted to ask, do you happen to have any times later in the day?
Um,
I'm in Eastern time, so I think the
yeah,
last time available is 3:30. And it just so happened that today I was available,
yeah,
but like it just because it's hurricane season, it's
yeah.
gonna be kind of hard for like the next month or two to
Right.
kind of so
Yeah, I mean
yeah.
that can be kind of as needed. I mean
Okay.
I'm definitely down to meet, what works with your schedule.
Okay.
So just let me know and we can work that out.
Okay. It shouldn't be too big of a problem.
Yeah.
But if I need to meet like after work, because some days I'm here until 6 or 7. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'll let you know. Thank
We'll
you.
chat. Yeah, we'll chat. Yeah. Yeah, if anybody, again, same thing with the rest of you. If you need whatever arrangements to meet or whatever after hours or something, we can, or on a Monday or a Wednesday. I typically teach all day on Mondays and Wednesdays, but again, I can be pretty flexible in the afternoons. So just let me know. All right, folks. Well, this has been great. I will post this video on Blackboard so you have it as a reference point if you need to review it, and also for the people who weren't here. But again, feel free to email me. Feel free to go ahead and set up Zooms or meeting times whenever is convenient for you. Again, it doesn't have to necessarily be this week. You're welcome to on Thursday, but definitely within the next few weeks, let's meet and let's talk about topics and make sure that you have a good starting point. And then we'll just kind of go from there and meet as often as you all deem necessary. But I am available to you um, over email or on Zoom or whatever throughout this proposal process because that sets you up on a good note. So I want to make sure that everybody has a project that they're going to be proud of at the end and that's going to work for our purposes. So yeah, just set up meetings and stay in touch, and we'll talk soon. Yep. All right,
Thanks.
folks.
Take care.
All right, have a good week. See you later. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you.